Welcome back to Josh Bearhart's Reading Room. I'm Josh Bearhart Hawk, author of The Journal, GPS Signal Lost, and Legends and Tales, creepy and fun stories to tell around the campfire. Today, we are on the final chapter of The Journal. We've made it. We're going to get all of the answers. All of our questions are going to be answered. And then we'll have some more answered next week on the retrospective. But if this is your first time here, go back and watch the series. We've got all the previous 22 chapters of the journal all in a playlist for you, so you can keep up and know what's going on with the story. And then you can come back here and unravel it all as you find out what's going on and get the mystery really going. So we'll just jump into chapter 23 today. Next week, like I said, we're going to have a kind of a breakdown of the story and talk a little bit more about it and the inspiration, all that kind of stuff. So make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss that. But chapter 23 is called Decisions. Josh sat in stunned silence, finally realizing the truth, but unable to fully accept it. The woman had called 911. The paramedics did what they could, but in the end, he didn't make it. Tears streamed down his face as he thought about his family and what they must have gone through. He always thought he had more time, that he would be able to see his children grow up and see his grandkids. Every emotion was hitting him at the same time, and he had a lot of questions. "I'm dead? Is this the afterlife?" he finally said. "You are dead, and this is one afterlife. Things are actually much more complicated than that, though," Heath responded. "So, all that stuff about you, what does it have to do with me? Why have I spent the past few weeks being haunted?" To put it simply, I am what is known as a Reaper. It is a little like the Grim Reaper, except there are more of us, and we all used to be human. The things you have been uncovering and reading in my journal, those happened to me. I, like you, discovered this house and wound up dying shortly thereafter. He paused to give Josh some time to process the information. When I died, I went through the same process as you. I spent some time, what I felt was only a couple of weeks, solving my own mystery that led me back here. So, is this some kind of purgatory? Does everyone get sent here? No, most people aren't so lucky when they die. You see, there's a balance to the universe that must be maintained. What we experience as life is only a single plane of existence. In order for things to exist and time to flow properly, a deal had to be made. In the beginning of time, there was a war between existence and nothingness. Every time existence would create, nothingness would come behind and destroy. After several eons of this back and forth, a deal was struck between them to allow some things to exist while still maintaining nothingness. Existence could create life and matter, but when those things that were living died, they had to help move the wheel of time forward for 10,000 years before being devoured by nothingness. As part of this deal, and to keep balance, Reapers were created. These were beings charged with the task of ferrying souls to the afterlife and watching over them as they all toiled. Each Reaper would serve 500 years in this duty before being released. As a reward for your sacrifice, Reapers would gain an eternal life where their loved ones would be able to join them. Heath once again paused, seeing a look of confusion on Josh's face. Assuming I believe any of this, and so far I'm still not sure that this isn't some kind of fever dream or something, how are the Reapers selected? Josh asked. Each Reaper is charged with finding their replacement. They have to select the proper person, plan that person's death, and lay out the clues to be solved. There are rules around what can and cannot be done, and violating those rules comes with dire consequences, Heath said, turning his gaze to the fire as he spoke. "So what does any of this have to do with me?" Josh asked. "I selected you as my replacement," Heath said. Josh sat back in the chair, absorbing everything he had been told. It was hard to believe, to say the least, but as he mulled it over, he came to an awful realization. "When you say planned the person's death, do you mean you planned my death?" In order for the contract to be fulfilled, the potential Reaper has to face a series of choices. These choices ultimately culminate in the person dying when they still have years on their balance. When we are born, we are allotted a certain number of years. In order to become a Reaper, you need to have at least half of your years remaining. I set up the conditions, but you made the choices that resulted in your death, Heath said, his voice cracking and a tear falling down his cheek as he spoke. But if you hadn't selected me, if you hadn't set up the circumstances, I would still be alive? I would be there with my family? Josh's face turned red as he spoke, and his voice began to rise. That is true, but your sacrifice isn't in vain. Heath began before being cut off. I want to leave. I don't want anything to do with this, with you, or this prank anymore, Josh said, yelling at the top of his voice now, as he stood up and started moving toward the door. Leaving the office, he headed through the foyer and was nearly sprinting by the time he reached the front door. Slamming the full weight of his body against the solid wood of the exit, he found it didn't move. Stepping back, he kicked it before running into it once more, with the same result. Defeated, he collapsed against the door and began sobbing. It's no use. Once you're here, there are only two ways you can leave. You need to make a choice. You can choose to become a new Reaper, or you can choose not to. There's no rush, but until you've made the decision, those doors stay closed, Heath said, speaking softly as he approached. I'll never get to dance at my daughter's wedding, or travel with my wife. I'll never see my son grow up and become a man, all because of you. Josh's eyes were filled with hate and anger as he looked up at the man now standing over him. I know how much this hurts. I've been exactly where you are right now. There's more to this, but right now is not the time to talk about it. Go upstairs, relax, and think over everything. When you've had some rest, we'll talk again. When Heath had disappeared into the office, Josh got up and made his way upstairs. His mind was spinning as he laid down in bed. What else was there? He was convinced there was nothing Heath could say that would make him want to accept becoming a Reaper. His life had been stolen from him, and he wanted revenge. For the first time in what felt like years, Josh didn't dream of the parking lot. Opening his eyes, he was disappointed to find himself in the same four-poster bed he had laid in the night before. Getting up, he made his way downstairs once again, following the smell of bacon and eggs. Walking into the dining room, he nearly turned around to leave when he saw Heath sitting there at the end of the table. Have some eggs. You look like you could use a good meal. He smiled as if the previous day had been nothing more than a joke. Reluctantly, Josh walked over and grabbed a plate, piling a little bit of everything on it before sitting as far away from Heath as he could. Looking at the fork in his hand, he wondered if it would do any good to try and attack his captor. You can stab me all you want, but I'm already dead, so it really won't do much, Heath said, taking a bite of his toast as he eyed the fork in Josh's hand. It'll make me feel better, Josh said. For a short burst it might. But as I said last night, there's only two choices if you want to leave. What happens if I refuse the offer? Well, when someone refuses the offer, the old Reaper is sent to be tortured in the core of a star for 5,000 years before being removed from existence. It's kind of a way to prevent those who would abuse the system from becoming Reapers, Heath said, scooping some eggs into his mouth. And what about me? You would be wiped from existence immediately. No suffering, no toil, just becoming nothingness. You suffering and me getting nothing sounds fine to me. What happens if I accept? Josh said, a tinge of sarcasm in his voice. If you accept, you take on the role of apprentice to me for the next few hundred years. Once you're ready, you become a new Reaper, and I move on to eternity with my family. It will then be your job to ferry souls and watch over those who toil in the hands of time. You'll need to select a replacement for yourself, and the cycle begins again. If you are successful in selecting a replacement, you will be granted your very own paradise, where you will be reunited with your family. Not just your wife and kids, mind you, but other relatives that you want to save from the toil. You will all live in a world of your own making, without fear of death or becoming nothing. He spoke in between bites of bacon and sips of orange juice. Josh stood up and walked over to the window, looking out into the garden. Waking up this morning, he was sure of his answer, but now it seemed more complicated. He had lost so much because of Heath, but maybe eternity would be enough to make up for it. There was a risk, though. If he couldn't find someone to take his place. As he stared at the beautiful garden, he spent a few minutes deep in thought, before finally making his decision. Turning toward Heath, He looked him in the eye and gave him his answer. And that's the end of the story. There's a reason I left it ambiguous, and you're going to find that out in the retrospective video next week. That video is available now on YouTube if you want to go check it out. But I want to know in the comments down below, what would you do in Josh's position? If you were in a situation where somebody had taken your life and you had an opportunity to have an entire eternity with your family, what would you do? What decision would you make? So let me know that down in the comments below. I'll be interested to hear what you have to say. There's other stories I've got, like I said, GPS signal lost and legends and tales that I'm going to be covering on the channel. By this point, I might have already started one of those, so keep an eye out for those as well. I've got a lot of other things coming up as well, some different plans and some other books and stuff that I'm working on. So stay tuned for all of that. But I do want to thank you all for watching. If you stayed through this entire series, if you enjoyed the book, make sure you hit the like button. Subscribe, tell people about it. It's available on Amazon and on my website, so you can go over there and order it. Those are all linked down in the description below. But I do want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.